Leave for coming. The Gemara says in Sotah, a couple of blot back, HaTorah Chayzeres Aloim Del. And the Ben Yehoyada says that means that the Talmidei Chachamim, they don't wait for Talmidim to come to them. They go around looking for Talmidim at any opportunity, whatever Talmidim they can bring closer to Torah. So Rav Leif is embodying that tonight by coming and being Mahanos with the Torah and Chizuk, and welcome to all those around the world that are joining us. And Mitzvah Hashem, we should take Chizuk and be Mesoyer towards Kabbalah Torah, to be able to be Mekabelit, be Mechazik in Torah and Lima Torah, and continue in the journey through Shas and Kinyan HaTorah. Shkoyach Rav Leif.
Shus Shlita, Rav Bamberger, who arranged this, Agudah Yisrael, the Daf Yomi Commission, and Tyra Chavrei HaKollel, and community in Passaic Clifton. This isn't specifically L'Nishmas, anyone that hasn't been targeted as such, but I think we're still under the influence of the loss of those Memheim Kedoshim, the 45 Karbanis that were Niftal Lag B'Omer, which we recently celebrated, Salil Nishmasam, and the Schutz for Shlema told the Gedolei Yisrael that needed for Shlema. Mein Reb Shmuel, Ben Ita Etel, Ben Ramatasyo, Ben Machal Chaim Ben Etel, and the Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka, Siyata Shmai, they should all, Moshe Hill, Ben Mendel, shall ever for Shlema B'Korav Bez Hashem. Well, we'll finish the Masechta. Now, there's something called truth in advertising. I was Zaych over the years to tape many shurim for Daf. We'll talk about that a little later on. My second grade Rashi Rebbe, Eli Teitelbaum, jump-started Daf Yomi all over the world with Daf. At its heyday, there were 19,000 people listening to every Daf. So I was Zoich as a Kerlingerman in Telz and then as a Rebbe to be able to tape different Masechtes in Daf. Lamaisa, it jump-started the Daf Yomi. But the shurim I give at the Agudah are be'iyun. I don't give a Daf Yomi shir. Many others give magnificent shurim and Daf Yomi. I don't. So how do I have the chutzpah to make a siyum on Masechta Sotah? So the hashgacha is, when Rav Bamberger called me, I have an olam that we learn be'iyun Masechtas. We're holding now in brachas. We finish Sotah, and didn't make a siyum yet. So maybe I can make a kosher siyum l'chatchila Masechta Sotah. My olam will make a little bit later. So I just want to, truth in advertising, I admire those that are learning Daf Yomi, and those that are gathered here and throughout the world that are making the siyum als Daf Yomi. The siyum I'm making is nicht als Daf Yomi, but it's still the same Masechta Sotah. The Mishnah said, Mishemeis Rebbe Botlo Anova v'Yiras Chet. When Rebbe was nifter, so the concept of Anova, modesty, and Yiras Chet was nullified. And there are many interpretations by the Rishonim and Acharonim is the Botlo Gamri, that level maybe of Anova and Yiras Chet together. But then the Gemara brings down a startling thing. Omalei Rav Yosef Litana. Loisisni Anova. Don't mention that there's no Anova, the Ikano. Because I'm an Anov. Ich bin der größte Anov in der Welt. it's so incongruous if you look throughout Shas of who exactly Rav Yosef was. He gave over being a Rosh Yeshiva to others. He was the greatest honor. So how could he say, "Ano, there's me"? So the Goyen right away explains, the Rilio, that there's a Tana in the Yerushalmi. His name was Ano, and he was a great honor. So he's saying, "Ikano" doesn't mean there's me. I'm a big honor. There's still Anivis. It's the Tana. But there are different pshatim at different people. The Foshim say, Sfas Emes has a mahalach, the Marshoy has a mahalach, Teres HaKanois has a mahalach. The Avnei Nezer in Shuvah says a phenomenal thing. I'm just going to explain it. Vazok Moshe Rabbeinu, Vanechi Mo. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest honor that ever walked the planet. And the Rebbeinu Shalom is made on this. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu entered the Eish to Mekabel the Torah. Moshe wrote at the end of the Torah, he wrote this, V'leikom b'Yisrael k'Moshe Hoid, Novi like Moshe Rabbeinu. If he's an honor, how does he write that? Explains the Avnei Nezer. And it's really based on the Chovos HaLevavos. The Chovos HaLevavos says that a person has to know who he is. He has to know his Keiches HaNefesh. He has to know the neshama that he has within himself. He has to be machshav who he is. Zogt the Avnei Nezer b'Yegir Rabbah, Moshe Rabbeinu was an onav, even though he knew who he was, and he can contest anyone, and there was never anyone like Moshe Rabbeinu in the history of the world. He still remained an onav. B'Yegir Rabbah, says the Avnei Nezer. So that's the simple pshat here. There's a disconnect between who he was and his anivus. Now some of you might still be puzzled by this. How could he say I'm the greatest onav if he was an onav? So I'll try to explain it in a Chassidish Oif for all the Kotzka that are out there. The Kotzka Chassidus and the Rebbe was renowned in Midas HaEmes. Emes was the most important thing in life. Rabbi Akiva Eiger had a son, Rabbi Shlomo Eiger. Shlomo Eiger got his son, Rabbi Leibel Eiger. And Leibel Eiger became a Kotzka. He disappeared, and he went to Kotzk. So Rabbi Shlomo Eiger was very concerned. He sent a shliach in Kotzk to find out what happened to Leibel. He comes to Kotzk and he's asking the people, does anybody know Leibel Eiger, Leibel Eiger, Leibel Eiger? Nobody knows who he is. There's communication. It's the wrong Kotzk. Finally, somebody says, you meant Leibel Shlomo Akivas. That's how he called himself. He didn't call himself Leibel Eiger. He called himself Leibel, the son of Shlomo, the son of Akiva. Yeah, of course we know him. He's in the Butter with the other Chassidim. The Butter with the Chassidim comes into the Butter and he sees a large gathering of Chassidim, and the centrality of the meeting of the Asifa was Bromfin, Umazit and nothing's happening. There's no Zmiris, they're not saying Tillim. He's all astounded, and he recognizes Leibel Shlomo Akivas. And all of a sudden somebody says, Ramoshe kommt, Ramoshe kommt. Ramoshe is coming, Ramoshe is coming. So Olam got all excited. And the shliach of Shlomo Eiger asked, Wer der Ramoshe? Who is this Ramoshe? People are getting so excited. So the fellow, the Kotzka sitting next to him, said, Ramoshe is the gresta onav in Kotzk. Ramoshe is the most modest, humble individual. He's the king of Anov in Kotzk. So he says, tell me about Ramoshe. What does he do? Is he a Rosh Yeshiva? Is he a Dayan? Is he a Rav? Is he a Rebbe? Ramoshe is a Becker. He's a baker. Okay. Maybe he's missing something. Maybe he has yichus. Und sein Tate and his father, Oicher Becker, also a baker. And his father, Agudah Becker, also baker. He goes back to Shlomo Eger, all hands lost at sea. I mean, here he is, sitting with Bramfin, nothing's happening. They get all zeruddled, all excited because this great Onav is coming, and who's the biggest Onav in Kotsk? A baker, the son of a baker, the grandson of a baker. Ad kan teichen dvorei was met gesagt in jene Stub. And in Kotsk, what did they say? In Kotsk they said, me ken sein a Becker, der Sohn von a Becker, der Einikel von a Becker, und me ken sein der größte Onav in Kotsk. You can be a baker, the son of a baker, the grandson of a baker, and you could still be the most modest person in Kotsk, the biggest Onav. The Hainu Anivis is a midah. It's not an individual who has so much and he's not arrogant, he's not preening, he knows it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avad, that's an Onav. Unser Moshe Feinstein Zatzal was the Gadol Adom, and Rebbe Shlomo Zalman Zatzal said he would have been a Gadol 200 years before. He's the biggest Onav. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Onav. But L'maise Anivis is a midah. And that's maybe the Pashup Pshat in the Gemara. Ikano, he's saying the truth. He's disconnected from being arrogant, about gaiva. It doesn't mean ikano, what are you talking about? Batla nova, ich bin da, ich ben onav. He's just being realistic. And again, many mefoshim give pshatim why it was necessary to say this. But that's the takeaway of Masechta Sotah. You know, Sotah said, Masechta is miloshin mosach shar hachotzer. It's a curtain. And when the Olam finishes Masechta Sotah, they are enveloped by the curtain of Sotah. They walk the streets, different people. They go to work, go to the Beis Medrash, Sotah Yidden. As it is with Baba Mitzvah and Baba Kama. And the other Masechtas B'siyat Shmaya that people are going to be learning. It's all about the protection that a Masechta affords. That's Masechta. So there must be a practical takeaway from Masechta Sotah. And according to the Kotzka, he says this in many places, the synopsis of a Masechta is the end of the Masechta. You want to touch up the Masechta, what's the takeaway of Sotah? Haray Sotah b'kalkula yazatzim v'nayayin, dinyan of kina v'nistera, ikano. You got to feel good about yourself. You got to realize that in life, even though there are mistakes that are made, ikano. And the Gemara concludes, Omalei Rav Nachman Latana loisisni yiraschet dikano. And many Mefarshim explain, but it's the same Yesod. The takeaway of Masechta Sotah for every Yid, every Ben Torah, every Chava HaKoil, every Erlicha Balabas, ikano. Ich bin epis. The Baldova, the Yetzer Hara wants to tear us down. And Masechta Sotah teaches us even Kina v'nistara, a woman suspected of infidelity, and all the limudim that we have, and even though Rebbe says Batla Nove, Ikano. And every person has to take that lesson home, to face their own Yetzer Hara, and remind the Yetzer Hara, Ikano, I'm a formidable foe. I'm a person of standing. Ich hab yichus, ich ben hayid, ich ben a ben melech. I have tznius, I have modesty. Recognize your core value, and then you can march on. Is someone else doing the Hadran, or am I doing it? Hadran aloch eglarufa v'slikla Masechta Sotah. Hadran aloch eglarufa v'slikla Masechta Sotah. Hadran aloch eglarufa v'slikla Masechta Sotah. Hadran aloch Masechta Sotah. The Hadran aloch. Datan aloch Masechta Sotah v'datan aloch. L'nisnashim inoch Masechta Sotah v'lisnashim inoch. Lo ba'alma hadeim v'lo ba'alma da'asi. Hadran aloch Masechta Sotah v'hadar chalon. Datan aloch Masechta Sotah v'datan chalon. L'nisnashim inoch Masechta Sotah v'lisnashim inon. Lo ba'alma hadeim v'lo ba'alma da'asi. Hadran aloch Masechta Sotah v'hadar chalon. Datan loch Maseches Sotah v'data chalon. Lo nisnashim minoch Maseches Sotah v'lo nisnashim minon. Lo ba'al mo'adeim lo ba'al modasi. Of course, Hadran means we're going to return, but Hadran is also Hadar. It's a crown. Those of us that have finished Maseches Sotah, we have a crown that we wear. Maseches Sotah. Yiratzim v'fanecha adin Eloheinu v'leviseinu. Shetei seiros rum naseinu b'olam hazeh. Seimanu l'olam haba. Chanina ba'pope, Romi ba'pope, Nachman ba'pope, Achai ba'pope, Abamori ba'pope, Rafim ba'pope, Rochish ba'pope, Sucha ba'pope, Ada ba'pope, Dor ba'pope. Harivnu adin Eloheinu zivis rosru b'finu. Ufi esamcha beis Yisrael v'nekulonu anachnu v'tzetzuenu v'tzetzeimcha beis Yisrael. Klonu yoidei shmecha v'loim nisarosecha ve'ovei sechakmein mitzvisecha kelon mili. Ili bisamim b'chukecha l'man lo yevoish. Lo ilum le'eshkach pikudecha kivam chisoni buch ato adinoi lamdeinu chukecha. Amen, 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 sel avoed. Moidim anachnu loch adin Eloheinu v'leviseinu shesamtach l'kenim yeshe beis hamedrash v'lo yisamtach l'kenim yeshe kronis. Shonu mashkim ve'im mashkimim. Onu mashkim divrei seiro ve mashkim dvarim betelim. Onu amelim vehem amelim. Onu amelim mekablim schar ve amelim vehem mekablim schar. Onu rotzim vehem rotzim. Onu rotzim mechaylim haba. Vehem rotzim lever shochas shnema v'ato elihim teridem lever shachas an shidama memilmo leyechetz yomein v'ani eftach boch. Yotzim v'necha adin elihai kishem zazaltani l'sayim Maseches Sotah kein tazrein lahas Maseches Svam acherim ulesaimum lil modalami lishmalas kaim is called every samater sachabiavo v'schutz kolatanoim v'ameroim v'samid echachamim yamid li ulazari shloi sama shater mipi ubizari v'zerazari adilom yiskaim bi b'salecha chotan choisach v'shach b'chot ishmor lecha akitzo yiso hisechichecha sisichecha כי ויהיו ביומך ויוסיפו לך שני זכיים, אך יום במינו, בשמאלו שבחבוי, אדוני יועז למו ייתן, אדוני יברך, אז עמו והשלום. יזכדל ויזכדש שמי רבו. ביום מאוד הוא עשית לסחדתו לחיו מסעיו, ולעסוק יעשון לחיילמו, ולמכנה קרתו דושלם לשחלו בגבו, ומקד בולחנו נוחו מנערו, ולעצבו פולחונו דשמיא לעשרו וימלוך קודשו בריחו במלכוסי וקוראי בחיי חויני ומחוינו וחיי דחו בייס ישראל בגולו וזמן קורי ואמרו אמן שמי רבו מברך למה לא מלמיו יסבורך וישתבח ויספורר ויסחימם ויסנסי ויסדר ויסעלה ויסעלו שמי לקודשו בריחו לילה מן כל בחסו ושרסות ושברסו ונחמוסו תמירום ביולמו ומרו אמן. ישראל ורבנון ועל תלמידיהן ועל כל תלמידי תלמידיהן ועל כמון דעסקים ברייסו תבעס חודין ובכל עשר ועשר ילון לכון שלום רבך ונבחס דברחמן וחין הריחן מזול לביחי פוקונומן קדום אבוין דבשמע ורוב ומרו אמן. שלומם שמעיו חיים תמולנו ועל כל ישראל ומרו אמן. ויעשה שלום עמנו וברחמו ויעשה שלום עלינו Ako Yisrael Meru Amen. Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Zemin Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Zemin Tov. Yeh lanu lecha Yisrael. Zemin Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Yeh lanu lecha Yisrael. Zemin Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Zemin Tov. Yeh lanu lecha Yisrael. Zemin Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Zemin Tov, Yelanu L'Choy. Ay, mama, mama, mama. Oh, do, 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 do. We're 1 week before Shavuos. 6 weeks into the Yoma. We haven't yet counted, so we're not going to say what the night is. According to Yoch HaShulchan, the transformation from Pesach, which is Chag HaCherus, to Matan Torah, is Poshet from Meichel Behema to Meichel Adam. The oima was barley, which is considered a secondary source of food. It's animal fodder. And the shtei alechem is highly refined wheat flour. So it's a process, these 7 weeks, of elevating ourselves from being behemoths to being bnei Adam. That's what Torah is. As we verstehen, was ist Kabbalas HaTorah? It's the Torah. It's living that kind of lifestyle. So the Matorah, the goal of this gathering tonight in the Siyum of Maseches Sotah worldwide, under the aegis of Agudah Yisrael, is pashut to be machshiv the loimdei HaTorah, the loimdei Hadaf, the Chavri HaKoil B'chol Hasav Hasar, and the Magidi Shir, the Gevaldige Mesiras Nefesh. And when you think of Mesiras Nefesh, the real Hakoras HaToiv has to go to the Noshim Tzidkanias, the wives of the Megidei Shir, the wives of the participants of the Loimdei Hadaf, the wives of the Loimdei HaTorah, that encourage, beg, cajole, threaten, and make sure that their husbands are steiging and lernen. I spoke earlier about Rebbeili Teitelbaum, and then of course Art Scroll, and the Mesifta Gemara, and the Daf Yomi Commission, and the magnificent Siyum Hashas that we've all experienced so many times. Remember, as a youngster, Manhattan Center was the scene of the Siyum Hashas, and they had all the Mesiftas coming to fill the place, and there wasn't a lot of people. Remember, Rabbi Yankiv Zatzal was Messiah, and maybe started brachas, if I'm not mistaken. I was in the Shtoimim as a high school bacha, that they can talk a half an hour on Mishnah. Of course, Rabbi Yankiv. So the wives and the mothers and the grandmothers, they get a lot of Hakoras HaTorah. I know myself, when I was doing Dar Ladaf, so I had a little tiny apartment on Shemaine Drive, 60 in Galite lived there, in the Kedel and Tells, tiny 2-bedroom apartment. And the equipment was so sensitive that when I started taping, my wife could not move. Forget about a cell phone, there weren't cell phones in those days. And she pushed it, stayed, and did not move for an hour. It took me 3 hours to prepare the daf, an hour to tape the daf. And so for that time, she pushed, didn't move. I'm thinking to myself, all the Magidei Shir that will do anything and everything, taking care of their families and doing everything to make sure that the husbands have the menuchas hanefesh to prepare properly and to go to the shir and give the shir, and those that attend the shir. Tremendous Hakoras HaTorah to the Noshim Tzidkanias. So there are things I'd like to discuss concerning Hakoras HaTorah and Kabbalas HaTorah. Mamish Maseches Sotah Dikei Inyanim. The Gemara says in Maseches Sotah on Daf Yud Aleph and Bid Beis. Originally I thought I'd go through the entire Gemara with you, but there are many things to say and we're limited in time. The schar of the women of that generation, the Tzidkaniyasin, we left Mitzrayim. And the Gemara goes on to say, with many, many, many different explanations, how these Nashim Tzidkaniyas, they fetched water from a mayan, and miraculously in the pail, half water, half fish. They warmed up the water, they cooked up the fish. They gave the fish and the water to the husbands to drink, to eat. Agav, I'm just thinking now, there's a Pekivega in the Gillion of the Shulchan Aruch when he talks about macholos that are sakana. So Pekivega says every sakana is bottle except for one. Something you probably never heard of. You look it up. Fish and water. Kvega says you can't eat fish and drink water. You can cook it in it, you can can it in it, but according to Kvega, it's still a sakana adiyamazeh. They could add petal or some kind of coloring into it. So Lamaisa, they probably served them the water separately from the fish. Maybe they made tea. Whatever they did, they gave them lunch. They prettied themselves up. They presented themselves. 9 months later, they had babies. And the Gemara brings psukim that they were terrified of the Egyptians Yemak Shemam, hearing that Jewish babies had been born. They would come to slaughter them. So they abandoned the babies in the middle of the fields. They couldn't bear to see their children killed. Malachim came down and cleaned up the babies from their embryonic fluids and gave them 2 combs, one of honey, one of oil, and fed them and nurtured them, and then placed them into the ground. And the Egyptians had heard that there were Jewish babies in the ground, so they brought oxen and plows to churn up the ground and kill the children. Not telling you Chedushim, you all know this from Alpha and Beis. And they were pulled further and further into the bowels of the earth. And the Gemara goes on to say that they were raised by the Malachim and they joined Klal Yisrael at Kriyas Yamsuf, fully grown. So the kasha is, what exactly did they do? They gave their husbands lunch. They abandoned the babies by the Arbeit macht frei sign. They couldn't bear to see them gassed and cremated. So they ran away. What did they do? This kasha puzzled Moram of Yashiv Zatzal. And he gives an incredible teretz. He indexes the Gemara on Yud Beis and Aleph, where the Gemara talks about Vayelech Ishmi Beis Levi. Mehechan Holach. Amram was the Gadol Ador. Amram declared, L'shavanu Amelim, we're wasting our time having children. They're killing our boys. Omad v'giresh ishta, he stood up and he divorced his wife. Omdu kulam v'girshu es n'sheisayim. They all got up and divorced their wives. And that was going to be the end of Klal Yisrael. Miriam Hanaviah was 5 years old. And she said, Gzeiroscha kosher mishal pari. Your decree is worse than pari. Pari legozer ala zacharim, and your gzeir is zacharim and nekevus. Pari only decreed against the male offspring, but your decree will ensure there'll be no girls as well. Pari, we don't know if his decree will be fulfilled, but your decree for sure, if everyone's divorced, there'll be no more children, no more Jewish nation. And finally, Pari legozar el aloyim hazeh, your gzeir is el hazeh and el haba. Pari's decree is only in this world, but your decree prevents these children from entering Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. What's a kasha? What's tutzachdo? Kids are born, they're massacred by Pari. What kind of Olam Haba? Says Rashi, Shenoi lodim, they are born. Umesim, and they die. V'zoich Olam Haba. If a child is born and alive for a nanosecond, he's guaranteed Olam Haba. You're denying them Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. Because if the women aren't going to be married and not going to have any children, then these children who are destined to Olam Haba will never go to Olam Haba. He remarried his wife. He had Moshe Rabbeinu. Zok Moral of Yashiv. That was the Mesiras Nefesh of the Noshim Tzidkoni Sheba'is and Adar. To be mezakeh the children in Olam Haba. Let's flesh this out. What is motherhood? Motherhood is when the baby's born and the baby curls its hand around the mother's finger. Motherhood when the baby is placed in the mother's chest. Motherhood is the bris. It's the upsharing. It's the bar mitzvah. It's the bas mitzvah. It's when you walk your baby down the aisle. Motherhood is when the baby, your baby, has a baby. When you become a Zayd, a Baba. And these Noshim Tzidkonias were willing to be Ma'aseh Nefesh and abandon their children by the Arbeit macht frei sign to guarantee their Olam Haba. So you know what Noshim Tzidkonias do? They have their eye on Olam Haba. How will this school affect my child's Olam Haba? This play date, this friend, this gadget, this technology. That's Maseches Sotah. If the Olam learned and finished Maseches Sotah, there was a mama and a baba and a wife that had her eye in Olam Haba and said, I want my mishpacha to be ensconced in the curtain of Maseches Sotah. All the Mesiras Nefesh, all the cajoling, all the excitement, all the inspiration, all the time being alone, to be able to ensure Olam Haba. So that's the first lesson. First lesson of Achana and Kabbalah to the Torah is the Sur Meirav Asei Tov. You have to filter your life. You have to have your eye on Olam Haba. How will this camp affect my child's Olam Haba? This vacation, this yeshiva, this Beis Yaakov, these friends, this neighborhood. Baruch Hashem, Yizayich to live in a thriving neighborhood and city of Torah and Avodah, Gewaldige Koil, wonderful shuls, Rabbanim, Talmidei Chachamim, Bnei Torah. I know Boy Finishi, because one of the families, actually two of the families that were with me in Minneapolis, moved to Passaic, and their children are going to big Talmidei Chachamim. So it's a decision you make. Every decision you make, you have to have your eye on Olam Haba. Now let's move back to the Gemara in Sotah Yud Beis, because that's also Hachonah to Kabbalah Satira. Shneit, if the Oz Yoshim Moshe, Klal Yisrael sang according to one Mandiyam of the Gemara, as one voice with one response, Shneit in Pasuk, Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah, Achois Aaron, Es HaToif Biyada, Vatan Lohem Miriam, Shira Lashem Ki Goiga. Miriam Hanaviyah. So we're establishing her credentials. She's a Nevi'ata. The sister of Aaron takes the drum in her hand and starts banging the drum. There's one thing she responds. Atan lohem, it doesn't say to who. Shira Lashem ki goiga. So why that pasuk of Az Yasher? And the shira of the men was fine. And the nashim, the shira was tupim chaylas. As Rashi says, they prepared ways to thank Hashem for events that hadn't even unfolded yet. They're preparing the dances, the choreography, the drums. When they crossed the Yam Suf, there was no Samesh music store for those who remember the day. You Pashin had to have the drums with you. That was the emunah of the Nashim Tzidkanias. They knew there's going to be a Geula. We need to prepare ways for the Geula before it even happens. So why does she have to sing this pasuk? Shira Lashem ki goiga. Of all psukim. What steht? Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah Achois Aaron? Moshe Rabbeinu was also Yoshe Moshe. He just sang the Shira. Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah Achois Moshe Satoif Biyada. What do you mean? Achois Aaron. And Hatoif, the drum, Beheya Yediyah. They all had tupim. And Biyada in her hand, of course it's in her hand. Where else? You play the drum in your hand. So the Divrei Yirmiyahu, going Lutfisharav before the war. He brings down this Gemara Yud Beis Amud Aleph in Sotah, Vaita Agamara Sotah. Miriam Hanaviyah convinced her father to remarry her mother. Apir Yain, the Gemara Babasa talks about it, and Yom Beis talks about it. Two people danced the night away, Aaron and Miriam. And Miriam picked up a drum, a taif. Biyada never left her hand. Hot taif, it was the same drum. She starts beating the drum and saying in Nevuah, Moshiach Shel Yisrael is going to be born. Moshiach Shel Yisrael is going to take Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. And for 80 years she's beating the drum to all the naysayers. And finally the moment arrives. The moment arrives. Moshe Rabbeinu is the shliach of Hashem to split the Yam. They cross the Yam Suf Oz Yoshem Moshe. Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah es hatoif biyada. Which Miriam? Achois Aaron. Moshe wasn't even born yet. She prophesied about the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Yeshua of Klal Yisrael before he was even born. So she's identified as Achois Aaron. Hatoif, the drum, biyada, never left her hand. Vatan le Miriam told the naysayers, Shira Hashem ki goiga. Can't you just see the Yidden who survived Churban Europa, the concentration camps, the ghettos, the gas chambers, the crematorium, the Santa Commando, who saw their families up in smoke? Shir al Hashem ki goy go, it's time to sing. Klal Yisrael just finished Maseches Sotah again. 14th time. Sniffling the Welt. Shir al Hashem ki goy go, Rabbi say. The Loim de Adaf, the Megiddi Shiuri Adaf, the Chavri HaKoilel, the Bnei Torah, the Balabatisha, the Bnei Torah Balabatim. You're beating that drum, and the drum never leaves your hands. That's what we celebrate tonight. We celebrate the Siyum Maseches Sotah with Yidden that never dropped the ball. They never dropped Sotah. Never dropped the Masechta. Whatever Rabbi Reb Chaim Stein Zatzal was Messiah, Shas, at one of the events at the Siyum HaShas, and he told me that he started learning the Daf Yomi the first day it was started. He learned the Daf Yomi from the first day it was started. Imagine the celebration of that moment, the Yid like Reb Chaim Stein, the caliber of Reb Chaim, the Gadol Ador, and he never dropped the drum. He never stopped learning Daf Yomi. This Daf Yomi is such an incredible thing. It creates an avirah, a chashivas, Yidden on the same daf wherever they are. You know, fly to Eretz Yisrael. You take the subway train in New York. So when I was a kid, people would read that newspaper, we don't want to say its name, in the hallowed Beis Medrash of the Koil, the NYT. People would read the NYT, and they'd read it with such finesse. Okay, the Wall Street Journal, they read the paper, and they were able, on a crowded subway, I once saw that they go from the first page, column A, to the 13th page, column C, without elbowing anybody. It's like a nest, it's folded like a postage stamp. I challenge you to take the train. IND, IRT, BMT, whatever you want, the F train, the D train. Take it in the morning. You don't see the NYT, you don't see the Wall Street Journal. You see Gemaras. You see hundreds and thousands of Gemaras. You see earbuds, listening to Shurim. You see Noshim Tzidkanias, Chivas Lavavis, Mesilas Yesharim, and Tehillim. I had to travel when I first came to New York 14 years ago. I hadn't been there in a while. I lived in Minneapolis for 19 years. So I had to travel to the city. So I got on the train, the number 4 train. And I wasn't exactly enamored with the moment, excited. There was like it was a darkening of the horizon, if you know what I'm talking about. The kids, it wasn't so pashut. All of a sudden I'm sitting there, and 3 fellas stand right on top of me. Each one to the right, another one hang on to the strap on top. I said, Rav, you holding the daf? I said, it's me kashas on the daf. I wasn't on number 4. I was on the Masechta. I was in a different world. Had the doors opened up for me to go. I walked out of the Beis Medrash. They turned the number 4 train that goes from Target, straight into Manhattan, from Flatbush Avenue, into Beis Medrash. On the plane. What happens on the plane? You all know what happens on the plane. Nobody dares look at that screen. Everybody's learning and learning and learning and falling asleep and staying awake and learning. But you must love us. There's 80 years after the liberation of Auschwitz. That's what you celebrate. That's what we celebrate. The daf, the resiliency of Klal Yisrael, the Noshim Tzidkanias with an ayin olam haba. So if we want to talk about the Hagdoma, the Kabbalah Satira, you have to go to the Hagdoma that you find in Masechta Shabbos on Daf Peichesam and Beis. The Gemara says, Moshe Ola Lamorim. He went up to Shemayim to get the Torah. Frag the Malachim, Ma Yularisha Beinenu, what's this mortal man doing with us, amongst us? So to Bein Shem Kavyachal, he says, to Mekabel the Torah. He said, Chem de Genuza, 974 Doros created before the world. What does that mean? It means the Torah doesn't need man. The Torah doesn't need the world. Torah existed 974 Doros before the world was even created. The frailty of the human condition. Why are they getting the Torah? Says the Rebbeinu Shem Kav Yachal, so to speak, to Moshe Rabbeinu Hechzalem Tshuva. Answer them. So Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm terrified of the Hevel Piyam. I'm scared they're going to burn me by the vapor. Says Rebbeinu Shem, hold on to my Kisei HaKavod and answer them at Tshuva. And Moshe Rabbeinu goes to town. Where you're subjugated to the Egyptians. Where you're exposed to Avodah Zareh. Do you have a father? You have a mother, according to the Medrash. Do you have kinna? You have jealousy? You have gneva? The Torah has nothing to do with you. You have no wiggle room. You have no choices in life. It's one nasa, nasa, nasa. So what do you want from me? The ganze Torah is for uns. Hoidoloi, they'll mask him. And they say, Mo'ad Shimcha b'chol haaretz, the Ben Shem give him the Torah. And then each one gave him matana. The Malach HaMavis gave him a matana. You know the Malach HaMavis' matana was? Ketores. And Ketores forestalls the Malach HaMavis. Says it's Sepulna, Ketores is Kvayt Shemaim, Ribi Kvayt Shemaim. So when the rebellion Shvei, Zatzal once told Talmidim in Philadelphia, there was a terrible matzav with people being nifty. He says, Kindlach, we don't have the Ketores, but we have Kiddush Hashem. We have Ribi Kvayt Shemaim. What greater Ribi Kvayt Shemaim can there be than an Olam coming together to finish a Masechta? But the Gemara necessitates some kind of definition. He's with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Why is he scared? And L'chari is right. What shaykhs and the Malachim have to Torah? They don't have a father, a mother, jealousy. They have no shaykhs to Avodah Zareh, to the internet, to things that can challenge a person. They have no wiggle room. There are 4 parts to Torah. And it's ganz yitochen that is Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Rush, Soid. Could be that we have the Pshat of the Torah, but there are underpinnings, mystical understandings, Soid, that we no shaykhs to. So maybe Taka the Torah is for the Malachim. It's not just the Pshat, it's the Soid. It's the Remez. And Moshe Rabbeinu's real problem? Hevel Piyam is an allusion to Hevel Piyam Shel Tineka Shel Beis Rabban. We're going to mess up. We're going to fall asleep by the Gemara Shavuos by night. Let's not kid ourselves. Everybody's looking around. Who's the one that's going to make the brachas? Nobody wants to admit that they slept half an hour, 45 minutes. Zog that mess. If you fell asleep, you can say it's okay. That's why I keep myself busy singing Siyum the whole night or right before I can sleep. There was a yid from London. He used to come to us for Shavuos. He's an unbelievable personality. He was nifta. And he'd sit there opposite me, take off his jacket, his hat, his tie. He was in his 80s. And he'd learned the whole night through. Didn't get up once. It's murdic to see. But the bottom line is, we're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. So maybe the Malachim are right. We have no connection to the Torah. So the Rebbeinu Shalom, Echoiz bekisei chvoidi v'hechzol hem tshuva. Zogt Chacham Ovadia, Rav Yosef Zatzal. Hagoyin HaGadol. Gedoyla tshuva. The Magas at Kisei HaKavod. What he's saying is that the Rambam says there's a certain place Malachim cannot ascend to. They can't push through the sea of ice, Kerach. But a yid who doesn't have Eira and does tshuva, Magas is tshuva at Kisei HaKavod. So Mamela, Moshe Rabbeinu, hold on to the Kisei HaKavod, tell them about tshuva, and then take the Torah and answer them. What I understand from this is the thing that we're frightened of, that maybe we're not going to learn as much as we're supposed to, and be as honest as we're supposed to, and do the mitzvahs like we're supposed to. Maybe that's the reason why we get the Torah. The Koyach HaTorah is phenomenal. Rabbi said, listen to your wives, keep your eye on Elam Haba. Make sure that your children, every decision you make, benefits their Olam Haba. And then you'll have Olam Hazeh as well. Realize, we can all steig in learning. You know, there's one Agudah that we need to strengthen if we want to have a Kabbalah Satara Mitis and Dereshim Verachim. It's a word in Yiddish that you can't translate in English. It's called Gishmak. Therefore, my Gishmak. My Rabbi Rav Mordechai Giftas Zatzal told me that when he was young, he thought he never learned Torah Lishma. It was too Gishmak. Then he saw the Eglei Tal. Then he writes in his Akdome that if you think Torah means breaking your head, you're mistaken. Torah Lishma is Gishmak. Mesukim Midvash V'nefes Sufim. That is Torah Lishma. The greatest Lishma, according to Eglei Tal, is to have a Gishmak. But you have to make the Torah Zis. How do you make the Torah Zis? Well, you daven. I have a question. The Torah is Mesukim Midvash V'nefes Sufim. Why do we have to daven to Hashem to make the Torah sweet? Because, rabbis say. So let's say in the days of yore, when the president was a cattleman, and somebody had the definitive peace proposal for the Middle East. And he comes, the president, to his house, and he serves him a big steak, and the president doesn't touch it. And the balabas doesn't understand. He walks over to the aide, he says, it's a gewaltige hashkacha, why isn't he eating it? Did you see that plate? See the grunge on that plate? It's like a brand new type of penicillin that the world had never seen before. It's purple and yellow. He's not going to touch that plate. You think the Rebbe Shim's listen to our tefillas? To our Torah? If our mouths are fazamt, if your mouth is sour, you taste sour food, even if it's sweet. If it's bitter, that's what you taste. Harav no, we daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu cleanse our palates from the day before, from the Yetzer Hara, from the Lashon Hara, from the Rechilas, from the Nivul Peh. That's how a person has to learn Torah. Steht also in Shabbos, Peiches and Aleph, Kof Aleim Har Kegigis. Siatsu Betachtas Dahor, how do you stand underneath the mountain? Kof Aleim Har Kegigis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted up the mountain like an overturned vat, Im Tekablei Mutov. If you accept the Torah, fine, Vim Lav, and if not, Sham Teik V'Raslim, you're going to be buried. Chavetz Chaim says Sham, it should say Pai, it's the future. If Passaic and Clifton has a Chavrei Akoilol of B'nai Torah, then there's life. There's no day schools, no yeshivas, there's no Beis Yankiv, Sham Teik V'Raslim. Any of you been to the great state of Georgia? Raise your hand. Any of you to the city of Savannah, Georgia? Valdosta, Georgia? Okay, just what I thought. Savannah, Georgia has a goyin. Ravik the Slater Shlita was the Rav. They have a koilo. They have a day school. They have gewaltige mishpachas, the Rab hands and others. Unbelievable. Daires. Valdosta? It's not happening there. Never made a day school. Sham Teik V'Raslim, you go to the cemetery in Valdosta, you see hundreds of kfarim of Erlich Yidden with Kehanim, the sign of Birchas Kainim. But Sham Teik V'Raslim, if you don't have Torah, that's where you're going to be buried. In fact, Tagoyim Moshe Soloveitchik, Kof Aleim Har Kegigis. What do you mean Kegigis? Kof Aleim Har. Lifted up the mountain, you're going to be buried. What does it mean Kegigis, like an overturned vat? So the Moshe Soloveitchik Nifl in the Welt. If you have a big enough vat for 3 million people, you can live in the vat. You can live, you can survive. But does is gelept. You don't see the stars, the Milky Ways, the flowers, the fauna, the flora, the beauty of the world. You're in a gigis. Kaf aleim har kegigis. Un teure lebt me nicht. I want to go off record, but, you know, the United States of America, you have as a bowl day. They play a lot of bowls, a lot of games, a lot of football games. And the Dalem sits down from the morning, from Nets, until Tzeitzek HaChovim, the Gator Bowl, the Alligator Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Pasadena Bowl, bowl after bowl, football game after football game. Und esst, pizza, and hot dogs, the goyim, they can have it. With popcorn, das ist gelebt. Das ist gelebt. Shmuel Birnbaum's Torah, das ist gelebt. Ramot gift is Torah, that's gelebt. You finish Maseches Sotah, das ist gelebt. I'm preaching to the choirs after gesagt. Gelebt is Torah and a Sivas and Chef Schmeitzer and a Ktsois and a Taisus and a Rashi and a Psadak HaKaimel Ublin. Das is gelebt. They think they're living. Kegigas. In fact, Taisus Nasiv and Ishma. Why do you have to force them to receive the Torah? It says Taisus Eishak Doila. Hashem is giving them the Torah with this Eishak Doila, great pyrotechnics. They're going to be terrified. And Mamela, he had to force them to receive the Torah. Frek my Rebbe, Shul Birmam Zatzal, so give the Torah on Eish. Imagine, Nasiv and Ishma, everything is great. You don't need kfir to be subjugated and forced, coerced. So Reb Shmuel, a tremendous yesod. Torah on Eish is not Torah. If you don't have the fire, the flame fire of Torah, that's not Torah. And it's kedai that for 1,000 years, Midor Rabba Leiraisa, they had an excuse, we were forced to receive the Torah, that's why we spoke Lashon Hara. Abim versteht das Torah-Zeish. So Rabbi Yisai, the yesod of Kabbalah Torah is appreciate the Nashim Tzidkani, B'schar Nashim Tzidkani, Shebayis Nadar, Nigal Avisenam Mitzrayim. Everyone should keep their eye on Olam Haba. How will every decision in life affect your child's Olam Haba? Nacha Masechta, Nacha Tosfos, more Iyun, more Hasmada. Children see how you're falling asleep over the Gemara. That's Olam Haba. Realize that we have the source of this aperion, of this celebration, because we keep on beating the drum. It's 14 times that we finish Shas under the Daf Yomi of Agudah Yisrael and Daf Yomi Commission and all the Yidden all over the world. Who would have dreamt that you'd have such magnificent venues of Siyumim, one after the other, as the curtain descends and envelops us? And remember the Yesod that Onu HaMelim, Beim HaMelim. Listen, I was Rav Minneapolis. It was before they had the covered dome. In those days, the people would go 10, 15 degrees below zero without the wind chill. And they had Gvaldig Hana. And our Olam had to have Gvaldig Hana walking to Shul on Shabbos in the same weather and coming in and warming themselves with the fire of Torah. What we've been doing for thousands of years and will continue doing at B'yas HaGayil. Praise Himself helping. You take the lessons of Maseches Sotah and all the Gemaras that we learn and transform ourselves into Hecha mention with higher Hasagas in Kavod Torah, in Hasmodas Torah, Avonas Torah, Amkus Torah, Chedushei Torah. We'll be Zechet HaKabbalas Torah, meet us in the greatest Simcha B'Viyas HaGayil, Me'erev Yameinu. Amen. I know what time it is.
Perfect. Mine was 10:15. So
look at that, come on.
What are you doing it?
About it. I'm so happy to see you. What's going on? I'm happy you came.
Yeah.
You're probably good friends with him also.
Kids?
Very close to Brian.
Kids, dad and mom.